Okay, welcome back to the Jiu Jitsu Mindset. This is Pete Deely, and the show will be amazing because of our guests, but not as good as it could be because Professor Lucas is competing today up in Las Vegas at the American National. So I'm going to miss my professor on our show, but he's up there doing good work, and we're sending you good thoughts, Professor. Fortunately, as of yet, the submission coffee remains not designated a performance enhancement drug, so you're still welcome to buy it and drink it as much as you might like. And if you go to the jujitsumindset.com, you can certainly order it there along with t-shirts and the like. Today, like in the past, the Divine has put in front of us amazing people, and today's no exception. So today we have Professor Sal Spinelli. Professor Sal.
Hello, nice to see you, brother.
Nice to see you, my man. And I appreciate you spending time with us. We've had just extraordinary group of people that have come along and talked to us about how jiu-jitsu and the martial arts have fit into their lives. And I know, your road to today includes not just jiu-jitsu, but other martial arts and a deep understanding of those things. And I one of the fascinating things of coming to jiu-jitsu later in my life, I started when I was 50. I'll be about to be 54, is seeing like how it changes people, and also talking to the people at what I would consider the top of the craft, and noticing these similarities. And the quote that I often remind myself is Pedro Sauer saying, listen, can't really get to be great at jujitsu and your character not be great also, because jujitsu has a tendency to kind of need out certain bad characteristics because it requires humility and other positive. So that's a long way around me asking you the question, like, as you look at your life, how do you think you would have been different at this juncture if you had not gone down the road of becoming, a martial arts professional, versus, you know, the road you did take?
Well, that's a great question.
Thank you.
I I really don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I just know the benefit of training jujitsu and where I am and who I've become because of it. And personally, myself, I know I would probably be a little bit more timid. I would
Hmm.
be um, a little less able to follow through on things. I noticed as my journey in jujitsu started, it was really hard.
Right. Yes.
You know, I realized, man, if I really wanted to do well at this, or better than I started, at
Hmm.
least, I have to really try. I have to really put in the work, put in the time. I can't fake anything.
Yeah.
You can't you can't pretend you're doing better. You can only just do better and
Right.
hope that your mentors and your professors recognize the things that are helping you get better. So for me, the reality is the way I see it, it's going to, jujitsu has helped me become a more, lack of a better word, aggressive person in my mind,
Right.
somebody who moves forward more than stays
Mhm.
stagnant in life. Um, so I think that's where jujitsu has helped me. It's just helped me propel myself forward when
Yeah.
the going gets tough.
Yeah, yeah. When we talk about jujitsu as a activity that the kids would benefit from, one of the expressions or ways that we talk about it is that if you have somebody who perhaps needs to be more assertive, jujitsu has a tendency to bring that out. And then if you have a kid that's too assertive, has a tendency to kind of tamp down that and find this kind of proper, appropriate kind of mode. And so it's interesting to me, with the from the vantage point of reflection for you, that that's a similar story. That for you, it brought out the more assertive nature of yourself, in a way. Could you talk a little bit about maybe your martial arts journey and how you came to jujitsu? And I believe that your knowledge and studies include other disciplines, and I'm curious about that. Could you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that?
Sure. So when I was 15, 16 years old, I was living in Florida, and like many 15, 16-year-olds in the, 90s. Um, Maybe I was 14 or 15. It's probably 14 or 15. Um, I was a Bruce Lee fan, you
Mm,
know,
yeah.
and I was a Bruce Lee fan, and I used to play music, like for some reason, music and martial arts kind of go together a lot,
Right.
So
Yeah.
I've always played music, and one of my friends in my band was, really good at Taekwondo,
Hmm.
and um, I used to screw around, like, thinking I was Bruce Lee or whatever, and
Hmm.
kind of toying with him when we were outside a show one day, and we were just goofing around, and I was like, "Oh, let me kick the hat off your head," and I kicked him in the head. It was
Whoops.
sorry, Scott. It was not a good moment.
Uh-huh.
I had the manager of my band at the time pulled me aside after I embarrassed myself,
Hmm. Hmm.
and he said, "Hey, do you like martial arts?" I said, "Yeah." And he was learning Wing Chun and
Hmm.
some Chinese martial arts, and I was like, "Yeah, of course, I'd like to do that." So I started my journey in Wing Chun, um, and the type of Wing Chun that we had done was it was less traditional, and it had a lot more of outside influences from, some Kenpo and some Kali and Eskrima,
Hmm.
and some internal martial arts like Bakwa and Tai Chi and things like that. And I really loved the whole
Yeah.
amalgamation that, I was exposed to. Um, and I just fell in love with it,
Yeah.
like just, it was very aggressive. It was in the garage. There was no
Yeah.
mats, early 90s. And then the UFC happened,
Right. Oh, yeah.
of course, it was typical story. And, after
Uh-huh.
UFC won, everybody sees Hoist Gracie do his thing.
That's right.
Mm. So I didn't find jujitsu for a little while, but there was some grappling and stuff in
Right.
the little that we had trained. So yeah, started in Wing Chun and, Chinese martial arts, a little bit of Filipino martial arts. And that guided me into a completely different mindset, I think, from that moment.
Yeah.
I would not try to kick my friends in the head anymore.
Yeah.
Realize how
If
bad that could be.
Yeah, if I tried to kick my friends in the head right now, I'd kick them in the knee. That's about as high as it's going.
Yes.
So when I would, it's in a similar manner, like I would say, like the very late '70s, early '80s, which is when I would have been a kid of a similar age. There was like I had a poster on my wall of Bruce Lee like floating across as he's about to kick Chuck Norris, I think, in Enter the Dragon, and he's both dancerly in this picture, like he's and ferocious at the same time, and of course
Right.
ripped. And I had this picture on my wall, and my first exposure to martial arts were around those times, and I never took any of that training to. Uh, I was fortunate in a certain sense. My first exposure to martial arts were among people who were not worried about belts, or like you come in and train, and so it was a very practical kind of mindset. So this would have been 1980ish, and it it gave me a chance to kind of understand it as something to come in. And I was reading then a lot of things too, so things like
Yeah.
Black Belt magazine, and I would watch kung fu theater. And as a kid, these are magical things that in my mind, starting to think about the nature of living life as a warrior in uh, in the ordinary things. I'm a warrior student. How do I not complain? How do I work hard? All those things, they matter to me. So,
Yeah.
but there's a road between like being a kid in love with something and then having your life being organized around it as a profession and as an economic thing. And I'm curious about that transition. How does it go from being something that you love and is personal, and then all of a sudden, as you go and become a professional, it becomes less about you and more about the people you're serving. Could you tell me a little bit about that process?
Yeah, I think early on, so I always had I don't know if this is from the movie side of it or whatever I assumed martial arts should be,
Right.
but when I first started training in Wing Chun and found, that little group, and we were training in the garage, and I always remember there was a little bit of incense burning
Yeah,
and
yeah, right, right.
some sort of like, just like Chinese meditative music in the background. It
Yeah,
just it just really it like the sense memory brings me back to that garage just when thinking about it.
yeah,
And but I always remembered I looked at my instructor, his name was Sifu Mills. I had looked at him with such like reverence, right?
yeah, yeah,
He was such a nice guy. He still is. I still train with him here and there, and he was always so direct and smart and very just very inspiring, and
yeah, yes.
I found myself in my head go like every little thing I did as a kid, like, what would Sifu Mills do here? Right.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
and just realizing how that was helping me transform my thought process of how to be a better person in specific situations.
hmm,
I thought, oh man, one day it would be cool if I became the kind of person to a kid like that someday,
yes,
because
yes,
it really affected me. And the more I had trained, I hope to at least one day be that kind of person to somebody else.
yeah,
So it was less really finding that reason to teach somebody to learn really how to fight, more so than being
yeah,
an inspirational person and somebody could look to for a positive,
right,
a positive mentor in their life.
yeah,
Um, and for me, martial arts happened to be the way I do it. I love martial arts. I love everything about it, the
yeah,
culture and the histories and the
yes,
infighting and all the stories,
right.
the drama and the rumors, the truth. All it's all
Yeah,
it's all
yeah,
fascinating to me, because at the end of the day, it's just fighting,
right,
you know,
right.
for most people. Um, but yeah, so yeah, so I think the transition when I wanted to become a teacher was kind of organic when I started understanding what it was doing for me to have a teacher,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and I think in terms of staying power, right? Many people they do something for a while, then they do something else, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with changing professions and whatnot. But when I think about what I perceive to be your road is that the road was pretty uh, one thing led to the other within the same kind of context. And when I listen to you talk, I think because what you were seeking tied into like the true part of who you are. The fighting part of the martial arts, has to be considered a subset of the entire experience. And the character development and the development of relationships between people in so many things, is the dominant part of the experience. So the fact that you wanted to be a light for other people to look at and orient themselves to, I find, very attractive notion that, and then you stayed with it because I think if you were there to train world champions, business is pretty lean because there's not that many world champions by definition, right? So you have to be connected to something else if you want to be in the business of it.
This is very true. If some world champion, it's amazing, and I want to be in their corner too, you know.
Yeah, yeah, right, without a
Um,
doubt.
but yeah, like if I taught music also for a little while, so my life went music and martial arts. They kind of
Okay,
parallel, and I ended up teaching music. I play music. I still play music semi-professionally and teach and do all that. But
cool.
just the that influence of certain people in my life,
Hmm.
I think it really um, made me desire to teach.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
um, but the um, but the thing is, I have to remain a student too. You
yes,
know,
right.
just because I'm in a teacher position doesn't mean I know it. The more you begin to teach, the less you realize you know. You know.
Right. Well, and that so many times have I heard black belts tell me like you get to the black belt and then you can really now you start,
Oh,
like
so true.
right. I mean, and I have many years to go before I get my black belt, but even I can get a sense like, oh, if it's 10 or 12 years before, from start to finish before I get that, I can already tell like my vocabulary is going to be still super small in
Yeah.
that. May I ask as a musical teacher, do you teach a variety of instruments or a single instrument or what's
Yeah,
your?
I Mostly taught guitar and voice. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was my thing for about, 10 years. I did that and it was fun. It was more thrilling to me than, getting in the van when I was, younger,
Yeah.
and not taking a shower.
One of the friend I have that I've had the longest in my life is an exceptional guitar player, and we both learned to play guitar as young kids, like 12-ish or whatever. And he has found extraordinary teachers over the last 40 years, and now can like play for real. And he's always been sort of like, oh my gosh, I wish you would play. And I have to say, when it comes to musicians and jujitsu folks, and of course, in my mind, I have a lot of things that I put through the prism of jujitsu, but I feel like musicians and jujitsu have a relationship to each other from this point. Like playing music with other people is really you need often other people to play music. And jujitsu, I was a soccer player as a kid. Um, like you can have fun kicking the ball around by yourself, but you really need that other person. Uh,
Right.
and could you, as your progression went along, did jujitsu start to take its kind of prominence in your martial arts brain at a certain time, or like,
Yeah.
like maybe you
Yeah.
could tell me a little bit about that?
So, the way I got into jujitsu, like I found a jujitsu school. It was I had moved from Florida to New York. New York was where I was born. New York, Florida, then California. I moved to California in '99, and the little group that I was with in Florida, doing Chinese boxing and Wing Chun, Kung Fu, and stuff like that. There was nobody affiliated out here
Okay.
in California, and I was like, that sucks, you know. But I did happen to find the teacher that I had in Florida. He got in touch with me and he's like, "Hey, I realized one of my senior students from way back in the day lives about an hour and a half from you."
Okay.
So for the first couple of years I lived here, I had gone and trained with him every weekend, and
Hmm.
um, he ended up passing away in a canoeing accident.
Oh, how terrible.
And yeah, it was really bad. But I was at the gym one day in Murrieta, and I got this flyer on my car. And the flyer on the car, it was this dude. He was jacked. He had like his face was just beat up, and like he had the ears, and this is
Sure.
like 2001, 2002 ish, maybe 2003. I can't. Man, it's so long ago, isn't it? It's like, oh man, more than 20 years ago. So, but it ended up being Chris Brennan's school from Next
Okay.
Generation, West Side Strangler. And I was like, that seems cool. Like, I want to try this. Like, I've always wanted to legitimately learn jujitsu. So I went to his school and got my ass kicked, you know, several times over. And it was just fascinating because he was, at the time fighting in Pride.
Hmm.
Uh, he had done King of the Cage and UFC, and very, very well decorated jiu-jitsu and MMA guy.
Right.
And I had met a couple good friends there that I still talk to. One of them, his name is Orlando Alonso, who owns Carlson Gracie School now in Menifee, California, and the other one was Josh Hanger. So if you know Josh Hanger, very successful jiu-jitsu athlete,
Right.
and he was even fantastic back then. An incredible high wrestler and just all around great person. But just watching guys like that, and all the people Chris had brought in, I was like, man, like jujitsu is far different than anything I'm used to.
Yes. Right.
That's and that's what I loved about it.
Right.
Like was okay if I hit you in the face or I take out your knee, and I have all these romantic ideas of
Right.
ending a fight in like 15 seconds.
Sure.
What happens if you don't?
Right.
Then what? Right? So it was that connecting point of when you meet and you touch and it doesn't work. Well, how do you finish it?
Right.
And that's when I fell in love with grappling and jujitsu. It was there.
Yeah.
And you know I had trained with Chris at his school for a couple years. It wasn't very long. He had moved to Lake Forest, which was about an hour and a half from where I lived. Then he moved to Texas, and I stopped training
Okay.
for a few years. Um, and then I was in a parking lot one day, and I had seen or I had heard a voice, and it was my friend Orlando that I had met there.
Okay.
And I had a connection with Orlando because we both grew up in the same city in Florida.
Right.
Had gone to high school with his sister. A small story, small world story. And anyway, he's like, "Hey man, are you still training?" It's like, "No, I haven't trained since Chris, left town." He's like, "Well, I'm managing a Carlson Gracie school in
Okay.
Temecula. Do you wanna come train?" I said, "Absolutely." Walked in, met some incredible people,
Yeah.
and my love for jujitsu was like solidified,
Yeah.
because it wasn't just about the fighting at that point anymore.
Hmm.
The school I had found, which was led by Professor Tom Cronin, it was, man, it was just a very, very tight knit family kind of atmosphere.
Yeah.
Still learned very, very good jujitsu,
Sure.
but man, I just fell in love with it and the culture and the people at that right at that point, about 2000, I think it was 2010.
Right. That's wild. The the grappling nature of jujitsu and the when you talk about the honesty part of it, I mean that's something that I think about a lot as somebody who cannot afford to be dishonest on the mat, because
Mhm.
if I extend a position past my body's capacity, the young, strong guys will easily hurt me if I don't indicate that, like, hey, my joints, my joint's not going to go like a normal person's joint. So I have to be comfortable with that and not have that be a place that my ego goes, what am I doing here? Because I can't do it as in the same way that somebody younger, stronger does it. Do I have a place here? And since I've decided I do, I can only retain that idea if I'm honest with myself in my with my training partners, which is an interesting compromise. And I just out of curiosity, I mean the butterflies of maybe a competition or whatnot. You're, did you ever have a gig that like really ratcheted you up? Like, man, I'm really, I'm excited about this gig, but I've got, the butterflies for it. Maybe was there ever a jujitsu competition that you're like, you know what, this gig and this competition were similar in what they did to me?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There were several gigs,
Sure.
I had, done some gigs in 2000, I don't know, late 2000, I don't know, 2018 or 19, playing for like high profile celebrity type people.
Yeah.
And and I'm like, getting ready. I'm like, I do not, I do not belong in this place, like these people, this is a reality I don't understand.
Yeah.
So I
Right.
was a little nervous, nerve wracking. But jujitsu competitions, man, I get nervous in all of them.
Yeah.
No, I don't compete a whole lot. Um, I like competing, but there was, let me see, like, you know what, what's really it, I think there was a competition where man, it's so bad. I don't know if was it early. It was earlier this year, actually. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
I I had cut 8 pounds in 2 days.
Oh my
Right,
goodness. Okay.
it
Right.
was the worst thing anybody. I will never recommend that.
Right.
Uh, I had not really committed my mind to doing the competition.
Right.
I uh my weight was fluctuating, and I fight in between medium heavy and heavy.
Okay.
Uh, and I really wasn't being attentive to my diet and my exercise routine at that point.
Right.
Uh, and I was like, oh man, like competitions in, you know, 4 days. And then my professor calls me up. Oh, I'm so excited to see you fight. I was like, oh no. Right. So I didn't want to say like I didn't make weight. I think that's
Yeah.
super
Yeah.
for yourself because it just shows you weren't disciplined enough to really follow
Right.
through on it. So I felt terrible. And I tried doing the thing and cutting the weight, and I was getting super nervous about it. I think more so that I was letting my team down and my
Sure.
professor down. and myself down ultimately that I kind of messed up, and I didn't commit that brain to doing what I need. And that's what made me really, really nervous.
Right.
Uh, and I went in, I fought anyway. I knew the guy I fought, and man, I gave it a good go for like, I think 2 minutes I had it, and then my gas
Right.
tank, boop,
Right. Yeah.
and I almost blacked out. It was terrible. So I think
Oh
that
no.
that was the fight that gave me the most butterflies because
Sure.
it was mostly because I wasn't prepared.
Right.
And
Right.
when you're not prepared, you're not confident. When you're not confident, you're nervous, and because things are going to go wrong, and
Yeah.
that's what. So that was my experience of not being prepared well enough, and
Yeah.
it showed for sure.
Yeah, and I think that that's, I mean, this theme of honesty, I think, competition, less about the performance of the athlete's techniques, but more about, you know, how you walk onto the mats, like that honesty for me. And it's interesting as a person of my age, and the nature of the rest of my life. I'm not jujitsu is something that occupies an unreasonable portion of my brain, but I got a blended family of 5 kids, a very aggressive job that requires lots of attention. I mean, I have all kinds of things that um, if they don't go right, have real consequences. And I can assure you that if I'm not on the podium in any given jiu-jitsu match, that there is no consequence to anybody in the world but me. However,
Right.
on the way into those things, you would think that I'm expecting a contract at the end of this bout for,
Right.
like I have an unreasonable amount of anxiety. But I find it interesting signing up for competitions. One of the things that it acts for me is this governor about the anxieties you just described, because I don't want to have to show up, have paid my money, and be DQ'd because I couldn't stay away from the pasta of the last 2 weeks or
Well, that and it's as somebody who like myself has put myself in different situations where I'm expected to have anxiety or be nervous, like
right.
playing music or
Yeah,
compete, or even getting in front of a class of 50 people to teach something,
sure.
right?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Um, it always makes me think there was this quote by Bob Hope. If we for the young people out there, was a fantastic entertainer, from
Right.
the 50s to the 2000s when he passed away.
Yeah.
Um, but he had a quote, and it was, "The day I don't get nervous is the day I quit."
Right,
Right.
right, right, right.
And I really thought about that, and it really means it's because you don't care,
Right,
right?
right.
You
I
don't
agree.
care enough to be nervous. Um, and you have to be very careful. If you don't care, then why are you doing it? You know,
Right, right, right,
it doesn't have to be a life or death thing to that extreme to
right,
be on the line for you to care, but you should care about your performance. You should care about how well you're going to do. It doesn't mean you have to win,
right,
uh, but it means you have to care just for your own sense of of self, like self-worth.
yeah,
Am I doing this because like I'm just going through the motions and it's arbitrary and it doesn't matter? That's not good.
yeah.
It's
What are you
almost
doing then? Right.
yeah, it's disrespectful to yourself. It's disrespectful to the people that are putting in all this time to do it, to prepare. So I think it's very important to be connected to something enough
Right.
when you do have a little bit of anxiety and you do have a little bit of stress and concern. I
I
think it's healthy.
I agree. And I also think it's a muscle. So the more that you're practicing the control within the anxiety, the more that that's present in your life, the better you are every place that exists. And so I think that caring enough, getting nervous, mastering the nervousness, mastering the anxiety, doing your best within it, and then accepting the outcome with graciousness as a win or learn type of approach to things. Um, I think affects other parts of our lives positively. I think over all these years, and you went into this life wanting to be an inspiration, a light that other people would look to. May I ask you to maybe think through the people you were there's lots of people who you affected who may not come and told you, but you probably have some stories about people that their time with you as a student mattered a lot. And I'd ask you maybe to tell us one of those stories of how jujitsu has changed someone around you, that perhaps you taught or in your community.
Yeah. I mean, I can name a lot of kids, it's mostly in kids,
Hmm.
um, that, man, this part makes me choke up too.
Yeah,
But I was pulled aside in class one day, right? And by the way, it's sometimes you don't expect this like instant transformation in a person to really say, that's it, that's the pinpoint time,
sure.
it's slow,
Hmm.
slow build in somebody. And don't get me wrong, dude, as teachers, it's not like you want um you don't want the thank you from the person, you just want to see them do better,
Right,
and
right.
it's I like to be motivating to people, but I don't need to know that I'm
Right,
good at it.
I
You
understand.
you just
Yeah,
want to give something back. So one of the parents pulled me aside and he was like, hey, my son's getting bullied on the playground. We were standing back, we were watching it, and these kids were messing with him, trying to like take his bike, and it was really hard to watch as a parent. And I'm a parent too, so
sure.
it started hurting. I
Yeah, yeah.
kid. So we had about 40 kids in the class, and I stopped the class and I said, hey, let me ask you guys. Um, with a show of hands, how many of you guys are getting bullied or have gotten bullied? And like hands just go up.
Right,
And man, just seeing the kids be that honest and vulnerable,
right,
uh, whether it's physical bullying or they've just somebody talked mean to them, you know what I mean? And they felt bad, that
right.
really hurt. Um, so it choked me up for a little bit, and it really made me understand that these kids are here because they want to be here. You
Yes,
know,
yes,
they
right,
want they're looking for something to make them uh a little more confident.
right,
And it's not always because they want to be a great fighter. The kids don't always want to be these little badasses,
right,
They
right.
they just want to be able to hold their head higher during the day.
Yeah,
Know? To learn how to deal with with physical resistance and wrestling during a class for an hour a day gives them that strength all week.
right. Yes, yes. Very
Um,
good.
so each of them, when I see them walk just a little taller and have
Yeah,
just a little bit more of a smile on their face that day,
yeah.
that makes me feel like that's a story in itself.
Without a doubt.
So I think that, and there's been other times where I've had some adults that have had really bad um, trauma, in
Yes,
their
yeah,
life, going through some really difficult times, and you could see it in their eyes.
yeah,
You
yeah, yeah.
see it, they're just staring and they're just sitting there. Um, and then eventually they'll come up to you and they're like, hey, I really appreciate you guys being here. I really appreciate what you was doing for me. Thanks for running the class. Just something very, very small like that.
Right, right.
And that I'm just like, that's good, man. I'm glad you are here.
Yes.
So that those little moments are what makes me feel
Yeah,
that it's worth.
that's so wonderful, and I can assure you, and I know this is obvious to you, but I mean, those moments with the kids that has echoes throughout their life, right? Because you talk to somebody like, "Well, tell me something about you." So often you get a childhood story,
Yeah.
and so many things form in our self identity early on, and that having that psychological support from somebody is just so critical. That the role of the coach as a non-parent parent, you're not the parent. However, they, particularly as the youngest of kids, still looking for an affirmation, like, am I doing this well? Am I doing this right?
Right.
That sort of, and that acknowledgement, I think, is part of that holding your head high, is that, hey, this is hard and I did it. And particularly in today's world, and I hate to turn into the old man on the porch, but the my youth, there was a lot more putting hands on each other, wrestling, both not in like an out and out fighting, but there was either I grew up in a particularly physical group of people and my uncles were all athletes, and that, so wrestling, gymnastics, all that stuff was like soccer, baseball, all baked into like what we did. And I feel like so many of the kids, it's possible that they could go through long stretches of time where they're never jostled, or they're never, you know, where anybody's put their hand on them for, so they have the confidence that like, oh, if this happens, it's not the first time. I'm less afraid of,
Yeah.
whatever. So I mean, the echoes of all the things you've done with all these different people are going to go on, for their whole lives. And it's good and, you know, uh,
Uh,
precious, holy work, if I can use such strong words.
I
Somebody,
no, I was saying I agree. It's a very important thing. So and you just reminded me, like um, some people don't, some people will never get to deal with something physically outside, in their normal life, and you
yeah,
know, fortunately, that's amazing. But it's just, I don't know. It just made me think, how careful you have to be
yes,
as around the youth, the kids. You have to be very careful of what you say,
yes,
because even in jest and sarcasm, that one sentence may ring in some kid's ear for the rest of their life that you've said, whether it
yeah,
was complete nonsense because you were just joking around, or it was something heavy and true.
right,
Um, so you have to really consider that. I remember so many small little things that like a teacher or
yes,
my parents has said, that it was just a little phrase. And I'm like, do you remember when you said that, Dad? He's like,
right,
I've never said that. I was like, no, you did say that. I
yeah,
remember.
yeah,
And I think it was um, it was the phrase, like, you have to press on, like press on.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Always remember that, press on.
right.
So, but he's like, I've never said that. I was like, you said that. So,
Well, and that's why I think the context that you put yourself in as a person, that the values of the context will seep into you, right? Because if you go to a jujitsu gym and it's the sarcasm and teasing and creating hierarchy based on a certain level of meanness that I've observed in certain places, can really it shapes a person in a certain way, and as opposed to a context of community, we're together, we're building each other up, we're iron sharpens iron here, we're all looking at each other as training partners, and not like you know um, who's the apex predator in the gym, and all the rest of it. And I think about, I mean, I was in a lot of those contexts. I saw it competitive situations, and I boxed as a kid, and I liked all that stuff. And it made my mom in particular a little nutty, because I had a tolerance for being hit in the face that she thought was a bad thing to develop. But you know,
right,
um, but when some of those experiences for me made me less afraid to be hit in the face. I mean, and that served me well in different circumstances. I was never an aggressive kid, but I was less afraid because I had a little bit of testing in these environments um, that served me well. And then there were times where, frankly, I did have to call upon that. There's going to be somebody out there listening to you and is like, man, I'd like to. Maybe I'm in the community. I'd like to find him. Train with him directly. Bring my kids. Can you tell us where to
yeah.
find you?
We are in Temecula, California. It's Carlson Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, Wine Country Jiu-Jitsu. So it's
Okay.
in South Temecula on Temecula Parkway and Butterfield Stage Road. There's a handful of Carlson Gracies in the
Hmm.
Temecula Valley. We all stem from the same professor,
Hmm.
which is Tom Cronin. And yeah, so if you want to go to find our website, it's temeculajiujitsu.com. So, and
Okay.
all our information is there. And, myself, and the co-owner of it is a good friend of mine. His name is Professor Asa Russell. And he, you know, great, another great guy. So
Awesome. How about Instagram? A lot of people are Instagram people.
Yeah, Instagram. I mean, if you want to follow me and my little journey on Instagram, it's Sal Spinelli, just at Sal Spinelli, or that's me. Or sorry, Sal Spinelli Martial Arts.
Okay.
And the gym's Instagram is Carlson underscore Gracie underscore line underscore country. So
Okay, excellent.
yeah.
All right, so hit rewind for those of you listening and write those down. Well, Professor Sal, listen, you were terrific to talk to you. I love what you've been doing, and I'm grateful that you spent some time with us today.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I'm 100% humbled to be asked to be on the show. Just watching the caliber of people you've had on here, it's just great to be in that kind of company. So I appreciate it.
Well, we're glad you're among us. All right, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.